Coming up on Something is About to Happen.
When you are God's choice, it doesn't matter where darkness has hidden you in its ugly veil. God, who is the light, he knows how to fish for you and pick you up in a second and snatch you from the back and bring you to the front, take you from down under and lift you up and over, bring you out of obscurity and establish you in nobility. I want you, if you have any area of darkness where it's not working for you, it's not happening for you, some things haven't occurred yet, some promises are not fulfilled, or you're confused or you're browbeaten, I want you to shout and call light to come forth into that area. Say with me, let there be light. That's my subject this morning. Let there be light. In Acts 15 and verse 16, Luke, the writer of Acts, says, after this, or he's speaking for God, that God says, I will after this return and I will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build it again, I will redo the ruins, and I will set it up one more time. What God is saying here in Acts 15:16 is that I love the mentality of David and how David brought worship to me and why he brought worship to me. Why David was a consistent worshiper and he had staying power in the work of worship. And his worship was prayerful, it was intercessory, it was supplicative. And I love the way David worshiped me. So after many eras and generations since David lived and wrote 3,000 years ago, God is saying concerning these last days that he will rebuild again, using the mentality of David to establish worship in the earth again. And we are a part of it here at House on the Rock. And God still uses David's intimacy with himself as an illustration to teach us the kind of relationship that God desires for us to have with the Almighty. And he describes this man, David, as a man after our hearts. And so, even though God boasts about David's many strengths and his sterling qualities and his many virtues, he also doesn't hide David's weaknesses, David's faults, his flaws, and his frailties from us. Not as if he was trying to mock David, but he wants us to understand that David, in spite of his challenges, was a man after his heart. Not that he was trying to belittle David, rather he wanted to open up Davidic thinking and Davidic mentality to the reader and also to the observer, so that we would look intelligently at the life of David and not just learn from him how much he knew, but learn from him how his mind worked. If you ever get to sit with a great man or a great woman of God, don't just sit there to glean knowledge, but try and find out how their minds work, how their mentality works. It was David's mentality that gave us the tabernacle of David. It was David's mentality that made God say of him, this is a man after my heart. Because David understands God on the basis of his past experiences with God. And it brings me to an important point where I must note how we explain divine realities that are impossible to understand by using earthly metaphors that we understand to help us understand those things that are normally impossible for us to understand. So for example, God will say in the scriptures that the hand of the Lord was upon Moses, or the hand of the Lord was upon Elijah, or the hand of the Lord was upon Ezekiel. And this would not be literal because God wasn't running around after them putting a physical hand on them. It was just an annotation that God was saying, my favor is upon Elijah, that my anointing and my commission, my power is upon Ezekiel. And here is David. David gives us metaphors when he's talking about God, and he tells us that the Lord is my shepherd. This he does in Psalm 23. He says, as I shepherd the sheep, so God shepherds me. And as a diligent and conscientious shepherd, I've gone out to look after my father's flock, and I am their shepherd, and my disposition to them is to ensure that they never lack anything that they need. And the way I ensure that they never lack anything they need is the same way that a greater shepherd than me always ensures that I never lack anything I need. And I lead them beside still waters. I make them to lie down in green grass. Likewise, God makes me lie down and be restful in the abundance of his supplies. And he also ensures that I'm not resting beside choppy, dangerous waters, but he calms me down and lays me down beside still waters. He restores my soul the same way I am a restorer to my Father's sheep. Everything I am to them is grandiloquently much more to me in the same way. So he uses my language and my methods to teach me how he is to me in a much greater way than I am to the sheep. And he says he causes me to walk in the right path because of his credibility, his reputation, the way that I want to protect my reputation to my father Jesse and to my 7 brothers so they don't think of me as a loser. Likewise, God protects his reputation as it concerns me, his child, and ensures that as I look after the sheep, he does even a better job, because he's never going to let the devil think that he's a lousy person at his work. He's never going to let you lose, because your loss is really his loss. Your failure is really his failure. And David uses that metaphor very articulately, very eloquently in the 23rd Psalm. But as he comes into the 27th Psalm, David uses another metaphor. And this metaphor is simply not that the Lord is my shepherd. That's one revelation. But he brings us to perhaps the most powerful revelation of the nature of God. And he says, the promise keeper is my light, and my salvation. Who am I going to be afraid of then? And you must appreciate now, my friends, that David was not just any old guy. David was chosen. And I am of the persuasion that in every generation, there are only a very small few persons that are truly gifted with the status of being chosen. Matthew 22 and verse 14 declares, and I read in your hearing, many are called, but few are chosen. In other words, it's not many that are chosen, many are invited. But of those who are invited, it's a specific kind of person that is chosen. Isaiah 48 and 10. Isaiah 48 and 10 throws some light on this prerogative of God. And he says, like silver tried in the fire, I have refined thee, and I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction. In simpler terms, what is a furnace? A furnace is a place where fire is heated to hundreds of degrees Celsius, where anything you put in there is going to cook, and after it's cooked, if you leave it there, it's going to burn. So after what is cooked is taken out and given for food, what remains in the furnace is what God is referring to in Isaiah 48:10, the debris, the stuff that was discarded, the stuff that was burned or burnt out. And God says, when I choose my own, those who I will deem with the status chosen, I choose folk who were left behind in the furnace. And so they're all burnt up. They are ashes. They look like they're good for nothing. Nobody would prize them as a being of any value or any worth. And what God is saying here is that when I choose, I don't choose like men. I choose from inside the furnace. What has been left there as worthless, as useless, the stuff that was rejected by men, the stuff that was discarded by men, the stuff that they sweep away before they start the next fire and take that junk and put it in the garbage can. In other words, I look for trash when I want to repose my treasure in somebody. I look for the stuff that has been worn out and wasted, and that's where I invest my glory, so that men will know that the excellency of the power is not in privilege, it's in my choice. It's not in you, it's in my doing, God says. So if you're one of those folk who's been burned by life, burned by enemies, burned by people who were supposed to love you, you were caught in fire by your own poor choices, God says to tell you that he hasn't written you off. In fact, your pain and your disadvantage might be the very reason why God has his eye focused upon you, and any moment from now he's about to shine some light upon you. And when that light shines, light has an uncanny way, when it's the light of God, of making whatever it shines upon become truly glorious. So what does chosen mean? Chosen means to be picked from among many. That means there were many. But he singled out one from the many. Then he looked at another many, and he picked out another one from the many. So that when you look in the whole canon of the Bible, you would think that God would pick advantaged and privileged people to do his will. But as you look through all the scriptures, God generally picks out the most disadvantaged of all when he wants to put somebody to work. He chooses the stone that the builders rejected. He chooses the brother who was thrown in the pit. He chooses Moses, the murderer. He chooses Solomon, the seed of Bathsheba, the adulterous woman with the king. The people everybody wouldn't want to choose or use, those are the ones that God goes for. Why on earth would he pick Rahab the harlot, or look for Ruth, the witchcraft-ridden Moab? Why would he use somebody like Jacob, a crookster, a 419? I'll tell you why. So that in spite of your disadvantages, he says, I'm going to choose you and use you to do something significant in your life. But I'm not qualified, Lord. I disqualified myself. God says, don't worry about qualifications. I have plenty of them in my faculty, and I can qualify those who are not called, and I can qualify those who are called. I can do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. It's not of him that wills, nor of him that runs. But when I choose to show mercy to whom I will show mercy, nobody can stop what I want to do. And I want to tell somebody today, I think, I might be wrong, but I think God chose you, because out of the people who were invited, it was just you who came to service this Sunday morning. Oh God, I feel something. And the fact that you walked and gave up something important to do because you felt that hearkening to the word of God was more important than all the other things you could do on a day like this, perhaps you are chosen. I don't know. But as we go through the word this morning, you'll find out if you're one of those chosen ones. You'll find out if you're one of those chosen ones. So now, he has a way of choosing whom everybody else didn't think could be of use to God. And David is such a one. David has come from a dark past. David's background is bleak and black. He's been rejected by the closest kith and kin. He was ostracized by his own family. He was the errand boy, never given any superior or elitist job in the family. He was never preferred or promoted by his father. And once God has chosen you, friends, you won't have to promote yourself. When God has chosen you, you won't need to advertise yourself. When God has chosen you, you won't need to build yourself a platform. When God has chosen you, you won't need to keep dropping important names and giving out your business cards. Because friend, when you are God's choice, it doesn't matter where darkness has hidden you in its ugly veil. God, who is the light, he knows how to fish for you and pick you up in a second and snatch you from the back and bring you to the front, take you from down under and lift you up and over, bring you out of obscurity and establish you in nobility. God can do whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. And so here's David. Out of the dark and opaque dysfunctional background of his life, God shined the light upon David, signaling to him, son, I have chosen you. I wonder how many of you here are chosen. How many of you here are chosen? And you can be chosen and be broke. You can be chosen and squatting in a paro, face me, I face you. You can be chosen and you can't rub 2 naira together. You can be chosen and everybody in your household hates you. You can be chosen and yet living under the threat of the javelin of Saul, the king of Israel, who knows that you might be next, and he's scared that what what you carry is much more than what he has. But in any case, even though you don't got money in the bank, you got Jesus in heaven, and you got a swagger that lets people know that there's something about this guy. Help me and go to 3 people or text 5 and tell them, whether you realize it or not, sir, there's something about you. There's something unterrestrial about you. There's something divine about you. Can I get a witness from somebody? If that's you, lift your 2 hands like this and shout, I must be one of the chosen. When light shines on anything, it's going to bring you knowledge, and then you will get understanding. And when you have understanding, God will give you situations, challenges, opportunities to test your understanding, not for his benefit, but for your benefit. So anytime you're really in the Word of God, you're going to go through a mind-expanding experience, and therefore you become more effective in your faith, more effective in delivering your life purpose in a victorious, significant way. Darkness cannot stand the presence of light. When God shines the light on anything, it becomes so powerful. What you really need then is just light to shine on that thing. Whether you realize it or not, all the components for success are already there. It just takes a good cook to pull them together. Every fiery trial in your life is a sign that God, the chef of the universe, is cooking. It takes time for some things to work. It takes time for patience to work focus. It takes time for focus to work presence. It takes time for presence to bring revelation. It takes time for revelation to give you confidence. God, in the way he designs your life, designs you with load-bearing capacity, because load is a similar word to weight. Weight or weightiness is the word for glory. Not everybody can handle glory, because glory and your ability to handle it must be designed into your weight-bearing capacity. It's time for you to stand up and stand out. If you stand now, the light is going to make you a shining, brilliant light of glory. Stand up to the glory of a new dawn in your life. It's your time to shine. Our Father is called in Scripture the Father of lights. And what he's saying to us is that illumination is different from creation. The manufacturer manufactured this loudspeaker, and it was created. But if I covered it with a black cloth, you wouldn't know that it was a speaker there. So it already exists, but you can't see it because it is veiled, or it already existed in its components, its ingredients, its various metal components, but that was buried in the earth, and so the earth was its veil. But when God started speaking word or speaking light, all of a sudden those components became visible, incalculably understandable as things that could come together to form the loudspeaker. So creation existed, but revelation made visible what already existed. Your healing already exists. Your deliverance already exists. Your financial breakthrough already exists. Your peace already exists. Your miracle, it already exists. Your husband and your baby already exists, but it's under a veil called darkness. That's why you need light. If you want light desperately in the areas of your darkness, lift your 2 hands and shout, let there be light in my life. Go ahead, say it like you mean it. 1, 2, 3. Say it again like you really want deliverance. Say it again that all hell will have to break away and remove their ugly veil. And so light just illuminates what is already there. If I turned off the lights in this room and asked you to keep perfectly quiet and still till it was perfect pitch, gross black darkness, nobody would know that you were here. Nobody would know that anybody was here. And let's say that you were the subject of God's visitation. And here in this room, there were rattlesnakes with poison. There were cockatrices and black mambas. And there were also lions and tigers and bears, and you could hear them. And what you heard caused you to fear. You couldn't see them, but you could hear them. And also in the room was your destiny, your new Ferrari, your $25 million, your breakthrough, your wife-to-be, and your children too, but you couldn't see any of that. But all you could hear was things that made you fearful. And because of the darkness, you wanted to beat the tracks and retreat. But God said, no, don't run away. And he says, I'm going to turn on some light. And he flipped the switch, which was his voice. And the lights came on, and you saw that every one of the tigers, lions, bears, and cockatrice were all tied up in chains. And they could only go a few meters. And he was careful to put what he has in store for you outside their reach. So when the lights came on, you saw what was yours because he already gave you the title deed to the room. But you also saw that where he put the enemies, they were under chains and reserved there until a later date. So now you know where to put your foot to avoid the lion. You know where to duck. You know where to head to take what God has given you. Because you will often place your treasure in darkness, and your secret riches in hidden places called darkness. But he turns on the light because he never hid it from you. He only hid it for you. But you're going to need light. You're going to need light. Shout at a neighbor and tell him what you need is light. What you need is light. Say it to yourself. Tell yourself, what I need is light. So look now, when they took Jesus to the cross of Calvary, they stretched him wide, they hung him high. And when he had taken the blow of judgmental wrath and exhausted all the wrath of God, he said, being alive, he survived the judgment. He said, tell Telestai. He wasn't asking you to go and tell Telestai anything. He was just simply saying in the Greek, it is finished. What was finished? The entire repository of promises, precious, exceeding great and precious promises, by which he abrogated every gift, every grant that he was ever going to give you. And he allocated all the provision already when he died on the cross. That means it is all already yours. That when he died, was buried, resurrected, and then he ascended on high, my friends, he went and sat down at the right hand of the Father. And he entered into rest. The Father entered into his rest on the seventh day of creation. The Son entered into his rest in the moment of ascension. And once he had ascended, when you ask him for stuff, he's not going to get up and start doing some work to try to get something to you. He already finished his work on the cross of Calvary, and he distributed all those things to you and made them available to you here on earth. So you don't need to ask him for stuff, and you have to learn to do like Paul, who didn't ask for stuff. He simply said, God, grant us a spirit of wisdom and revelation. What's that? Light. In the knowledge, that's light, of the Son of God, who is light. That the eyes of our understanding, that means you might not understand how light works, might be what? Enlightened, to know what we already have, the hope of his calling, the riches of the glory of his inheritance, where? In the saints, and the exceeding greatness of his power toward those who believe. Shout at somebody and tell them it's already yours. All you need is light. Yeah, tell somebody else, all you need is light. Tell a third person, all you need is light. You just need him to turn the light on it. And when God shines the light on something, it becomes powerful as a result. When God shines the light on a jawbone of an ass, the jawbone is going to kill 1,000 Philistines. When he shines light on 5 loaves and 2 fish belonging to a little boy, it becomes enough food to feed nearly 20,000 people. When he shines light on a stick for an axe head that was lost whilst it was being swung to cut trees, that stick begins to swim like Michael Phelps. It starts starts swimming and then does some diving, like deep sea divers, and fishes out the axe head, and the axe head also begins to swim. You hear what I'm saying? Why did it happen? Because God shone the light on somebody, on something. He shone the light on Ezekiel. He became a prophet. He shone the light on a teenage boy called Jeremiah. He became a giant killer, a prophetic waymaker to nations of the world. He shone the light on a guy called Paulo, who was a bad boy from the south side of Miami. And look at what God is doing. When God shone the light on the widow's nearly empty cruse of oil, that cruse of oil became abundant in its flow, and it only ceased to flow when there wasn't something to flow into. If that's you that I'm talking about, I want you to shout, Lord, shine the light on me. Shine it on me. That woman didn't know that she had resources in her house, and the prophet said to her, what do you have in your house? And she said, really, I don't have anything but a practically empty cruse of oil and a barrel of flour. And he said, go back in the house, shut the door behind you, because God had shone the light on something. Because when divine glory and something that looks incapacious and incompetent come together, he places competence where there was incompetence, advantage where there was disadvantage, power where there was pain, ability where there was inability or disability, strength where there was weakness. Am I talking to somebody yet this Sunday morning? If that's you, lift those two hands again and shout, God, please shine the light on me.
Next week on Something is About to Happen.
There are things that are about to happen in your life because of the light. And when God lifts you up and starts giving you titles in your business and in your company, the folk who are still in darkness are not going to understand how, what, why her. What they don't know is that when light shines, the darkness comprehends it not. There's somebody here. You've been through hell and high water. You've been through every kind of breakdown and heartbreak, and you made some poor choices in your life. And the enemy wants to use that as basis and premise to wreck your life. But the devil is a liar. Just when darkness was going to consume you, God sent the light, and the light has shone on the good thing inside of you, not the bad thing, because God is about to lift you up. He's about to raise you. He's about to show them that nobody can unchoose what I choose. Nobody chooses for me. It is of not him that wills, nor of him that runs, but I am the one that chose mercy. I will use whoever I want to use. I will empower whoever I want to empower. And you have no consultative advice for me in the matter, because the last time I checked, you are not the Godhead, I am.